Hi everybody, my name is Sam, and I'm going to be walking you through the first part of the reading section in Practice Test 1 in your SAT books. If you have your SAT book available, get it out now, and you can follow along, read, and write along with me. But if you don't have the book, that's okay. I have everything reproduced here, the questions written down, and the passage as well. I will be going through this just the way that I do when I am doing it myself, when I'm taking the SAT myself, kind of walking you through the exact thought processes that I try to keep in mind when I'm doing it. So let's begin. The first thing that I think about when I'm doing a reading section of the SAT is, before even looking at the passage itself, I take a look at some of the questions. The first several questions to kind of get a sense of what I should be thinking about when I'm reading the passage. And to do that, I'll first talk about two different types of questions that you'll see in the reading part of the SAT. The first is kind of a broad, general question that's asking about the passage in general, the passage as a whole. Something like, what is this passage talking about? Or how does this passage talk about its subject? Something that you really need to have read the whole thing to answer, and that you can't get from just one specific part of the passage. The second type of question is a very specific question, something that's asking about a specific paragraph or a specific sentence or even a specific word in the passage. With these questions, you can generally get the answer by cherry picking, if you will, the specific item in question and looking at its immediate context. So you really don't need to have the whole passage in your head to answer these questions. And so when I do this first pass through, I'm looking just for that first type of question so that I can kind of prime myself for things that I might want to think about on my first read through of the passage. So let's go to the first question here. The first question says, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? Great example of that first type of question. It's broad. You need to kind of read the whole passage to understand it. And this is something that I'm just going to keep in the back of my mind as I read this the passage, and so that I can answer this question after reading it. Second question is much the same. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So again, I can kind of prime myself to be thinking about this answer. It might save me some time later on if I'm thinking about it when I'm reading the passage the first time. Question 3, as used in line 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means. Now, this question is an example of that second type, the very specific question. In this case, it's talking about one word, and it gives you line numbers to find it. So I don't need to think about this question at all until I reach it, because once I see it, I can go to those lines, find the context, and answer the question. So I won't worry about that for now. But I'll stop there, those first 3 questions. I don't want to give myself too many things to be thinking about, because obviously I want to be able to get something out of the passage itself while I'm reading it the first time and kind of be ready for any question. But so those are the 2 things I'll bear in mind. And now we go to the passage. So pause the video and read the passage, whether here or in your book, and then we'll join again in a few minutes. All right, so pause now. Okay, so you should have had time to read this now, so let's get to the questions. All right. So the first question, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? Pretty general question. You're going to get it in a lot of tests, and it's often the first question that you see because it's, again, very basic. What happens here? Important thing to note, first off, is there's a difference between things that happen in the passage and the thing that happens in the passage, or what best describes what happens in the passage. In other words, this is asking for the main event of the passage, or what it goes to describe in its whole. So be careful. There may be some answers here that have to do with the passage or are discussed in the passage but aren't the best description. So my rule of thumb is never go through a question without reading every single answer. Even if I'm sure that A is correct, for instance, I'll still read the others, just for no other reason to confirm that I'm right. Okay, so A, one character argues with another character who intrudes on her home. There's a case for this being in the passage, but it's really not the main event. B, one character receives a surprising request from another character. This is a strong candidate. It definitely does happen in the passage. The surprising request, of course, is the direct request for Naomi's hand in marriage and the blessing on that. And it's surprising, again, because it's direct. There's a lot of time devoted to it in the passage. It's not just one thing that happens, but there are several paragraphs that kind of go towards explaining it. C, one character reminisces about choices she has made over the years. That really doesn't happen. D, one character criticizes another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. Now, this is one that kind of does happen in the passage. There is an unexpected course of action. Chi is certainly not expecting this request from Akira, and she is critical of it. However, again, it's the criticism itself is not the main event. So in this case, B is the correct answer. I'll highlight it here, or bold it. Question 2. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? This is asking something actually fairly similar to question 1 on its surface, but the answers we'll see are actually worded and structured very differently. They're asking how is this described in the passage, generally. So A careful analysis of a traditional practice. So there is a traditional practice discussed here. It's the practice of using a mediator or not coming directly to ask for someone's hand in marriage. But it's not an analysis of this practice. The passage only goes so far as to say that he broke that practice. So the first part of that sentence is not right. The second is. And that's what you're going to see a lot in these types of questions. You'll see a case where it's broken into several parts, and maybe part of the answer is correct, but part isn't. So what we're looking for here is the answer, both of whose parts are correct and clearly have to do with the passage. So B, a detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. There is a meaningful encounter here. It's the quest for Naomi's hand in marriage, and it is depicted with detail. The whole passage goes to talking about it. So that's a good one. C, a definitive response to a series of questions. There is really no definitive response, and there are questions, but that's not the basis of the passage. D, a cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. The anecdote doesn't seem amusing, and it's really not recounted cheerfully at all. So the answer here is B. All right, question 3. As used in line 1 and line 65, directly, most nearly, means, etc. So this is one of those very specific ones where we can look at one word and just go cherry pick it in the passage. So I've highlighted or bolded here again where it's used. Line 1 right here, a hero came directly, breaking all tradition. This gives us a little bit of information, but really with these questions, you're going to need to use a little bit of context. So I'm going to read a few sentences in and see if I can get more information. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a line go-between, etc., etc. And so we kind of get the sense that coming directly is in opposition to a go-between. Let's use line 65 now and see if that matches up. He says, I ask directly because the use of a go-between takes much time. So again, he's asking directly rather than using a go-between. So we see that these two things really are in opposition. So my theory is that coming directly, or directly, means kind of not having a go-between or something like that. Let's see if there's an answer like that. And we see that C, without mediation, is pretty much exactly what I was talking about there. So the correct answer is C here. We can look at the others to confirm that they don't make sense. Frankly, confidently, and with precision, those all don't fit as well into the passage as directly is used there. So C is the answer. Okay, questions 4 and 5. These are asked kind of in tandem. Question 5 is directly referencing question 4 by asking about evidence for the answer to question 4. So it can be tempting to kind of go about this backwards and use the answers from question 5 to inform you about what the answers might be for question 4. I think this is, in general, not a good idea because there are often going to be pieces of evidence in this question that are for incorrect answers from the last one, so it can throw you off. So let's answer this one correctly, and then if there isn't a good piece of evidence that supports our answer from question 4 in question 5, that's when we know something might be wrong. So question 4, what reaction does Akira most fear from Chi? I'm going to say A, she will consider his proposal inappropriate, bearing in mind that she is kind of the mother figure here. She's wealthy, and he is doing something that's breaking with tradition. It is not normal. So now we can go to question 5 and see if there's some evidence for our answer to the question 4. So here are the 4 answers here. His voice was soft, refined. This is A. This doesn't have anything to do with anything. B, you know how children speak, etc., etc. So this does talk about being earnest and children who are immature. So that's evidence for a different answer that we did not answer. C, please don't judge my candidacy by the unseeliness of this proposal. So what Akira is saying here is, please, I know that this is untraditional, I'm breaking the tradition, but please don't think less of me. So this is great evidence for the answer that we chose. And so that makes me feel good about it. D has nothing to do with it at all. And so we can go back here to the answers and feel pretty good about C being the evidence for our answer in A. And so since we found that pair, that really solid pair, that's what will be the answer, so A and C. All right, question 6. In the passage, Akira addresses Chi with, etc. So this is a great example of one of those questions whose answers are structured very, very similarly. All of the answers here have X but not Y, structured the exact same. And so they have two parts to them on either side of this but not. And so what we're looking for here is to see if the answer has correct pieces on both sides, not just on one side. So that'll be the correct answer. So A, affection, but not genuine love. It's really not characterized by affection, the way he talks to Chi, asks her this question. He's very serious. B, objectivity, but not in complete impartiality. Neither of these really has to do with the way that he's speaking here. C, amusement, but not mocking disparagement. This definitely doesn't have to do with it. Amusement is not at all what he's using. He's very serious. And so D, respect, but not utter deference. So he is being respectful here. He's being very calm and kind, but he's not deferring to Chi's wishes. He is very clear that he's going to marry her daughter regardless of her answer. So he's not deferring entirely. Both answers are correct, or both sides of this answer, so D is the right answer here. All right, question 7 now. The main purpose of the first paragraph is to ... Okay, so this is one of those smaller, honed-in questions. It's asking about just one paragraph, the first paragraph. And so we can just go read through the paragraph again a couple times and see what the answer might be. There's no tip for this type of question in general, but in this specific case, it's important to note that this first paragraph actually happens after temporally after the rest of the passage. The rest of the passage is actually kind of a flashback. And so the first paragraph is really, really important to read over again so we don't forget that and can get the correct answer. So he's asking, would she have been more receptive if he had done something different? And so given that, we can tell that he's analyzing a reaction. D is the answer here. All right, question 8 is asking another very specific thing about a specific word. So it's asking about the word form in line 2. Let's go back to the passage here. Let's see. Line 2, form, is right here. So had he followed form, had he asked his mother to speak, etc., etc., would she have been more receptive? So had he followed form, this is suggesting that he didn't follow form because it's projecting an alternative that he didn't do. Let's look back to this first sentence. It's saying that Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. And so the first sentence is saying that he did not follow tradition, which sets up a really, really nice parallel, suggests that form means tradition. And so that's going to be what I'm thinking here. Form means tradition. So the answers here, B is custom, which is synonymous for tradition. And so that's going to be the answer that I choose here. And we can confirm that A, appearance, doesn't make sense in that context. C, structure, that also doesn't work. And neither does D, nature. So B, custom, is synonymous with tradition, which was set up as analogous to form. So that's the answer. All right, questions 9 and 10 now. So these are, again, that set up kind of questions in tandem, where 10 is asking about evidence for the answer in 9. Again, let's resist that urge, that temptation to look at 10 first and use that as the only evidence for 9. Again, it's really, really best to at least look at 9 first, kind of get a sense of the options that you have, get a sense of which answer might be correct. And then, of course, we're going to go use 10 to provide the evidence, but really it's best to have a kind of a sense of what it might be first. So let's look at 9. Why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? So based on what we know from the passage, his own parents are not mentioned. So A, no. B, he worries that Naomi will reject him and marry someone else. That isn't mentioned either, really. C, he's been offered an attractive job in another country. So that is certainly the case, and so that does lend it a sense of urgency. And D, he knows that she's unaware of his feelings, and that's true, but it doesn't really lend it urgency. So C is our answer for now. Now let's see if we can find things that support that in 10. So go back to the passage, and here are 10's answers. So A is, I don't want to trouble you. That doesn't really add much. B, normally I would approach you more properly, but I've received word of a position. I have an opportunity to go to America, etc. And so this provides really good evidence that he's being urgent, which he normally would not do, but he's being urgent because he has a new opportunity. So again, great evidence there. C, depending on your response, I may stay in Japan. That doesn't add much. And D, I see I've startled you. Again, that doesn't add much either. So we found that pair. We found those two answers that work really well together. So it's going to be C and B for 9 and 10. And that does it for the first part of the reading section. Thank you all for listening very much, and best of luck.